Coming to you from a humble newsroom on the back lot of yesteryear. Yesterday's news today. Equal parts exhaustively researched news show and retro radio drama. Jonathan T. McNally and his small team tell the stories of 2020 as newsmen from the 1920s, while struggling to keep their broadcast on the air. Tune in right here each and every Monday for the latest. As for now, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Denberg. This week we will be doing things a bit differently. There's much that I would like to cover, but our current situation prevents me from doing so. This week it sounds as though we must make a case for our continued existence. Why yesterday's news today is vital. What makes a fact-based news show in this current era so important? Thus, the news in this particular show shall be about the news. According to a Gallup poll in September, distrust in the news is at a record high, with 6 in 10 Americans having little to no faith in news media, while such trust has actually been on steady decline since the 1970s. It has been consistently low for the past decade. Another poll from those same folks show that 81% of Americans believe news media is critical or very important to democracy. These two statistics are incredibly at odds with one another. So how did we get to this point?
Hey guys, Scarlett's car just pulled in.
Oh, boy.
How confident are you about this plan of yours?
Somewhat.
Denberg, lock the doors.
Jonathan?
If Archie is right, we'll finish this episode and the show will be ours. And if not, let this be our final report. Now, please, Denberg.
Yes, sir.
The news was not always as it is now. In the middle of the 20th century, national broadcasters did not look to their news programs to make money. For many television network leaders, the news was seen as a public service. CBS was perhaps the most notable in this space. They had the great journalist Edward R. Murrow, and his fine reporting about Europe in World War II, and later in the 1950s, his crucial criticism of McCarthyism. Eventually, he was followed by Walter Cronkite, who covered countless key events at the CBS Evening News Desk in the 1960s and 70s, including the Vietnam War, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and the work of Martin Luther King, Jr., often ending his shows with the phrase, "And that's the way it is." He came to be known as the most trusted man in America. With these men as examples, it's easy to see why network news was highly regarded by the American people. But through the 1980s and 90s, things began to change. In 1986, the Lowe's Corporation, owner of hotels and movie theaters, bought CBS. CBS had been notable for more than their on-air personalities, but also a network of foreign bureaus for international reporting and a documentary division. As Lowe's sought to cut costs in favor of profitability, these were terminated along with massive amounts of staff, and many other newsrooms were brought up in the same way. In 1996, the Telecommunications Act was passed. Supposedly, this was an attempt to foster competition in the media industry by deregulating it. It had much the opposite effect. In the 80s, 90% of news media was owned by 50 companies. In 2020, that same percentage is owned by just 5. AT&T, Comcast, the Walt Disney Corporation, Fox Corporation, and National Amusements, owners of Viacom CBS, are in charge of most every news broadcast that exists. And unlike the network leaders of old, these massive corporations are very much looking for their news enterprises to turn a profit. Just like CBS, the costs to create quality news coverage have continued to be cut. And in its place, there is a new focus on instead making the news entertaining.
Hey guys.
What is it?
Scarlett is walking up now. What took her so long? She was screaming into her phone for a long while in the parking lot. Needless to say, she does not appear to be in a good mood.
I just thought of something. We locked the door, but she most certainly has keys, right?
Oh, I did the little chain thing too, so unless she decides to break through that, we'll still be fine. We may need to move some furniture soon.
Oh, no. No, no. What are you all still doing here, and why am I locked out of my own building?
We must report the news one last time, Scarlett. Surely you understand.
Surely I don't. Now, let me in and leave.
Ma'am, we'll just be here a few minutes.
Knowing your shows, it's going to be a lot more than a few minutes.
All right, someone help me with this desk.
Oh, you're here. Good. In that case, let me in, or I'm calling the police.
What does Bruce have to do with
Oh, right, I forgot about that.
Bruce?
One moment, Scarlett.
Hey!
So, after that somewhat less than uplifting Thanksgiving report that I gave, after already having been fired, Scarlett may have issued a super tiny, itty-bitty restraining order preventing me from being near the studio.
Bruce, then why are you here?
It may have slipped my mind. Of course it did.
Go. Cover the next part of the story while I try to reason with her.
Good luck with that.
Scarlett, may we talk a moment?
Focusing on the whims of their shareholders, corporations greatly changed the news landscape of old. There was now a need to make everything marketable. News shows started to have flashy graphics, dramatic music, and headlines that looked like they could be torn from the pages of a pulp fiction novel. Often there seems to be more effort put into a news show's production value than the actual content of the coverage. And according to a report by the Reuters Institute, they're almost right to do it. In their study, they found that traditional news media has become far less important for individuals under the age of 35. The research points to how much media there is to consume these days, and how the news very much has to compete with the likes of Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter. They further found that younger audiences see traditional news as negative and depressing, and look instead to social media and news aggregators for more entertaining coverage. As a result, many reporters and anchors are chosen for their sunny dispositions and pretty faces. And I can attest that those two qualities do not always coincide with the quiet, world-weary exasperation that hard-hitting journalism sometimes requires. To make things even more entertaining, a lot of news plays like a midday talk show, and debate panels now rival some of the shouting matches from the good old Jerry Springer Show. James Fallows, longtime journalist, former speechwriter, and media educator, comments on the problem saying, "The discussion shows that are supposed to enhance public understanding may actually reduce it, by hammering home the message that the issues don't matter except as items for politicians to fight over." In these panels of pundits, there is no time for informed, evidence-based arguments, rather a collection of experts all talking over one another, hoping to get that gotcha soundbite that might get further reported on in some future broadcast. And our political debates have responded in kind. We have already covered on this show the sorry state of the presidential debate in recent times. A flurry of insults and shallow criticisms now take the stage, instead of candidates discussing their platforms and stances on important issues. Debates no longer help inform the public on who they should choose, but rather just further ingrain partisan divides within the nation. And this is in no small part due to their framing by networks. Advertisements and intros for each debate play like the opening to a wrestling match, instead of a quiet evening of political discourse. And despite those who might criticize him, the current president, Donald J. Trump, fully understands this. He has said time and again that he does wonders for the ratings of news shows that cover him, and he is not wrong. He's found an easy way to co-opt the airwaves by saying things outside the norm. From his time in reality television, he knows what words and antics will put him in the spotlight. A prime example of this was when a simple misprint in a tweet led to weeks of coverage. Covfefe was the speculation of journalists across the country, and Mr. Trump's team leaned into it. They have used similar practices throughout his presidency, creating stories that may have distracted from more pressing current events. A loss of focus on what's truly important is one of the greatest failings of this industry in this day. It is why I, as the entertainment reporter, am forced to cover atrocities like the Kardashians, pop idols, and even worse, TikTok stars. And why Jonathan feels the need to read fluff pieces about falling cats, bigoted wizards, and goats run amok. Everything is done in an effort to appease the ever-looming algorithm. Every news network's end goal isn't to inform as it should be, but rather to become a hashtag on the trending page. Excuse me, Bruce. What do you want? We may need your help out here. With what? About that desk. 2 very large men have arrived. Is it the police? Not yet, but these guys can definitely get through that front door if they want. And I'm sorry to say I'm a bit too weak for moving that big desk. All right. Go ahead and take over. Oh, and Bruce? Yeah? When you're moving the desk, just be careful of the rug. The one I got from our sponsor, Dayoff.ltd, who do custom designs on rugs and art for any who might be interested. Link in the description down below. A seamless transition, Denberg. Oh, you think so? And you're gone. All right. Where were we? A reliance on ad revenue ruining all of news media. Bruce is indeed... Bruce is indeed correct that much of what runs the world today is based on clicks and follows, but this particular issue started a bit earlier than our current internet-savvy age. You see, the proliferation of cable news created the 24-hour news cycle. This meant that unlike the venerated hour of nightly news that we started with, news producers and programmers had to fill every minute of every day with content. This created a void that more entertainment-style content was created to fill. It also created a self-perpetuating practice wherein every day had to come with breaking news. The all-day nature of the product had to sell its audience on its very existence. This meant more of a focus on disasters and mayhem, anything to catch the audience's eye. Essentially, if there is always breaking news, then you must always be tuned in. With this never-ending cycle of quick turnarounds and lowered monetary investment, journalistic integrity took a hit. Strict deadlines made some reporters err on the side of more superficial writing. A critical piece of investigative reporting assuredly takes longer than something more frivolous. There is also the practice in some newsrooms, especially at the local level, to simply copy and paste script from other sources or their parent company. The massive Sinclair Broadcast Group came under fire 2 years back for this very thing. They broadcast in a third of homes, so when a video spread across social media, showing their anchors across the United States doing the exact same read on a somewhat divisive promo, it led to concerns about the objectivity of local newscasters. The piece in question was a must-read dictated to countless local news stations by Sinclair. A 2000 Pew Research study found that 50% of journalists avoid newsworthy stories for fear of harming their career, and 20% had faced criticism or pressure for writing pieces that were damaging to their parent company's financial interests. In the words of Upton Sinclair, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Journalists also face the problem of losing access to big names who have big dollars behind them if they choose to ask the tough questions or write critical stories. With the internet, these issues have only become more pronounced. In the early 2010s, many media outlets were still figuring out how to properly implement this new platform. As they fumbled, citizen journalism grew in that space. This was seen as the democratization of the news. Anyone with a camera phone or a social media account could tell the world what was happening the moment it occurred. In theory, this sounds fantastic, but unfortunately there is no vetting process to become a citizen journalist. Thus, media outlets felt the crunch to keep up. A prime example of this was CNN's coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing on April 15, 2013. In an effort to break the news first, they released an erroneous report that a suspect had been apprehended, and many other news outlets followed suit, not wanting to seem like they were behind on this breaking news. In the end, CNN, the Associated Press, FoxNews.com, and the Boston Globe all had to backtrack with retractions. Errors in reporting are nothing new, as journalists are indeed human. The issue is that in an effort to stay relevant and keep up with the Twitter feed, traditional news media is often competing with the people of the internet who have no duty to reveal the errors that they have made. Oh no. Guys? Hey guys! Scarlett is calling.
We may as well hear it.
You idiots had better be out of there within the next 4 minutes. The police are on their way. You know, I tried with you. I had so many times where I could have simply given up, used the studio for something else, something that could have done me some good. Instead, I spent so much time and effort trying to make this work, and it cost me. You know that. It cost me so much. Brad, Chad, I didn't say to stop working on that door. If you had just listened to me, done your little news show the way I said, you'd have actually shown up in people's search results, on people's social media feeds, and you would actually have an audience. I may have even broken even. Instead, you and I are fighting over, what? The sound of four men, boys screaming into the void, bringing truth to power for absolutely no one to hear. Whatever. It's over now. You have 3 minutes.
Fellas, I just got a message from that lawyer.
The one that we're broadcasting to in hopes that we can make a case for why this show counts as a public service and thus shouldn't be shut down.
One and the same. He's saying it's not looking great, seeing as we may be currently committing, at the very least, a few misdemeanors.
He's right, Jonathan. I should at least go out there. I'm putting everyone and everything at risk.
No. I feel this can only go one way at this point. And so I would like to finish this broadcast here, with my friends. Now, Archie, I believe it's your turn.
Oh, thank you, Mr. McNally.
Here you go, and Archie?
Yes?
I am really sorry. I was jealous of you. You are a very fine reporter.
Thank you, Denberg. So are you.
Thank you, Archie. Thank you.
What is next? Yes. The Internet has had another unfortunate side effect on the news, and it too largely stems from advertisers. With the right search engine query, anyone can find articles to support their specific viewpoints. This search is then tracked via cookies. And algorithms will feed them more content in line with what they've already looked for. A mere exposure effect means that when people are exposed to the same stimuli repeatedly, they tend to like those things more. And research backs this up. Experiments discussed in Scientific American earlier this month consistently show that when people with divergent beliefs on emotionally charged topics are shown the same information, they often become more committed to their original positions. Advertisers love this, because they can continually expose targeted individuals to their products. But it creates an ideological echo chamber that the individual has little to no power over. Social media then allows people to create personalized networks, following those who agree with them and blocking those who don't. If they encounter a viewpoint from outside their network, it has become all too common to cry, "fake news." In a 2017 article, Joshua Gillian of PolitiFact bemoaned the term that now means next to nothing, saying, quote, "Politicians and media outlets have used the phrase to vilify any source, fact, or opinion they find contentious. Meanwhile, this ecosystem helps actual fake news to flourish. The troubling nature of these false stories is that in many cases they are surrounded by some truths. There are networks of websites that simply take a handful of facts and then contrive further elements from there. It is cheap to make and can be extremely profitable. During the 2016 presidential election, a group of teenage Macedonians created a vast network of websites with fake news supporting Donald Trump and disparaging his rival Hillary Clinton. Those involved said they could not care less about who won the election and were simply in it for the money. They found the most effective way to profit was to create the most sensational stories. A study from 2017 by Indiana University's Observatory on Social Media found that 15% of active Twitter accounts were bots, automated accounts made to look like real people. Many bots will post falsehoods in the form of memes or fake news articles, which then get shared and interacted with by further bots. This makes these posts seem more credible, and if individuals agree with the inherent bias, they are liable to share it as well, putting it before the eyes of those like-minded people linked to their social media. These bots even get followed and invade people's personal networks, sometimes inviting more bots into these very same groups. And with distrust in the media somewhat justifiably at a low, people are more open to all of this. Based on all the inherent weaknesses of modern journalism that we've discussed, it's somewhat understandable that people have begun to look for sources outside the mainstream for their information. In the past, we've talked about how groups like QAnon have spread in recent times. They use these same channels I've just described and are able to prey upon people's skepticisms. They sow widespread disinformation under the guise of a welcome alternative to mainstream news media. And with all that my fellow newsmen have reported here today, can you really blame those who fall victim to this?
Archie, sorry to interrupt, but the police are here.
Oh, that's not good.
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm on my way.
Jonathan, what are we doing here?
We are finishing this story.
I'm not sure that we have the time for that.
Oh, now we don't have time for a story, is that right, Bruce?
I appreciate the newfound sense of humor, but,
This is the police, open up!
I would like a few final words before this is all over. Hello, dear listeners. That is the state of the news today. What was once a public service designed to inform has become distorted by people and corporations seeking profits. The news should never be beholden to the wishes of shareholders and algorithms. It should just be the facts, the truth. As these are our final moments, I implore you, despite all of this, to not give up on the news. It is vital in this day and age to stay aware of what is truly happening around you. You can trust to a certain degree the mainstream media, but always take what they say with a grain of salt. Thankfully, many are still beholden to large enough audiences that they must admit their errors when they occur. But they are not without certain biases, not as a part of a vast liberal or conservative conspiracy, but simply a side effect of effective marketing. With this, I advise you to look beyond your network. Watch, listen, and read news that leans counter to your beliefs, that challenges you. And somewhere in the middle, therein may lie the reality of a story. Consider newspapers and print media. Firstly, they could use the support, but also they often work on those old-time turnarounds that promoted the trustworthy reporting that I sorely miss. Without such sources as the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, MSNBC, Vice, and especially local news stations as well as print media, and dozens of other sources I just don't have the time to list right now. This show would simply not exist. These are the multitudes of sources that you should be looking into, not just your most trusted newsman. Be careful of what you share and what you see shared upon the information superhighway. If something seems incredible, it probably isn't credible. Just because a piece of content boasts ample interactions does not necessarily mean it is authentic. If you don't know the source, look into it. Even if you do, check other sources and see if they confirm it. Become your own investigative journalist. Also, always check the dates of articles, as things can have a very different context if they're erroneously being shared in a different time. If you don't have the time to verify something's validity, perhaps you do not indeed have the time to be sharing it. Ideally, we could see all of news media reformed for the better. But for now, the onus to find the truth is in our hands. And if we here at Yesterday's News Today are ever to return, you can count on our help with these matters by giving you just the facts.
Oh no.
Thank you all who have listened to us in these strange times.
They're coming in!
Jonathan!
But if this is our end, if you never hear from us again,
Jonathan, step away from that microphone.
well then, I suppose it is